Climate change is an important issue, and there's a wide range of opinions on it, as some think it's man-made and others think it's just the Earth going through cycles of warming and cooling, and some completely deny its existence.
97% of scientists believe the climate is changing, yet some politicians still deny it.
The EPA justified its dictatorial approach by claiming its regulations will slow global climate change and reduce carbon emissions. But heavy-handed regulations and arbitrary emission targets will do lasting damage to our economy. And even the Obama administration admits that the rule will have little or no impact on global temperatures. Regulations should be based on sound science, not science fiction.
Now, placing the blame would be easy if it was all caused by man. In addition to climate change triggered by humans, the Earth goes through cycles of warming and cooling.
Scientists and educated individuals realize that anthropogenic climate change is a thing and is one of the bigger problems involving climate change.
Now, to understand that, we must understand how climate change works.
First, humans release gases into the atmosphere. Then, the sun beams infrared rays and heats the Earth.
The Earth then radiates heat back into the atmosphere, and occasionally the heat waves hit one of the particles in the atmosphere, and at that point reflect in a random direction. This means if a ray hits a particle, it could reflect back onto Earth and reset the process. But the sun does not stop beaming heat onto the Earth, which is why the Earth contains heat.
Well, at least in a normal atmospheric situation.
In a world where excess gas stays in the atmosphere, the rays that the Earth reflects back into space are more likely to hit a particle, meaning that the Earth retains more heat.
Now, the science makes sense, but it seems some people don't want to believe or admit they believe it because they were persuaded to think otherwise.
So Tess and I went around and asked some people what they thought.
That first person we asked was Vice Mayor John Dubois. Do you think others in our community believe this is an important problem?
Yes, I think some people think it's a bigger problem than others. It seems to be a little bit of a partisan issue politically. The real question is how much is the sea level going to rise over the next 20, 40, 50 years? And as you can see, I actually live here on the water, and over the last 15 years, I have been keeping an eye on the sea level rise. I have a very good barometer of it with the seawall over here. And I would say in the last 15 years, I would not say that I've noticed a rise of more than a couple of inches in the last 10 or 15 years.
What policy, if any, does government now have to deal with this problem?
Depends on what level of government. I think, again, because the Miami area is particularly affected, Miami-Dade County is taking a good look at it. They're investing a significant amount of money in studies and analysis, but ultimately probably need federal funding assistance as well as state funding to support solutions to it.
Now, being a politician, he had a very different answer from someone like Christopher Salinetro, a teacher at Airbase K-8. So we went and spoke to him. Is climate change a problem that you think is important, and why?
Yes, I do believe it's important because not just here in the United States, but in other places, other countries are having droughts that are taking crops away from them, which they need to survive, and without the sufficient requirements that they need, that causes a problem.
What policies should be put in place to reduce the effects of climate change?
I think we should hold companies accountable for their pollution if they get caught breaking the law or the policies that we have in place. And I do believe that we should be cautious of who we buy from and what we do with the products after we are through with them.
Now we interviewed these people because we believed they are people who care And it's true, they don't directly study climate like Dr. Bill Richards, a retired National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration scientist.
Hi, I'm Bill Richards. I'm a retired senior scientist with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. I worked here in the Atlantic Ocean on mostly tuna fishes for 45 years.
Do you think climate change is an important issue? If so, why?
Yes, it is an important issue because a lot of people are excited about it and talk about it. It's a big deal in the press and really throughout the scientific community because we've always had climate change. The climate has been changing since the Earth was formed, and over the past 400,000 years we've had 4 major glacial events where there were huge ice sheets over the northern hemisphere, and we still feel the effects of those today.
Do you think there is any actual data or proof that our climate is changing? If so, are these changes man-made?
That's a good question, whether they're man-made or not. There's some slight increases in carbon dioxide, but if you look at the data from, as I just mentioned, the last 400,000 years, and that data comes from ice cores in Antarctica, and it shows that there are more fluctuations. There have been higher temperatures and lower temperatures more than once, actually 4 times over that time period. So things are changing. Right now, we're near the warming high. Whether it'll continue to get higher, or as some solar physicists say, it's all solar derived, and we could be looking at a cooling period in 20 to 30 years. I don't think I'll be around for that, but you will.
Do you think most of your peers in the scientific community believe that climate change is an important issue?
Yes, I think most scientists believe it's an important issue.
Do you believe it's an important issue?
Yes, I do. But I don't think we can do much about it. I sort of agree with the physicist that it's probably solar influences because our Earth revolves around the sun. The sun is revolving around in the galaxy and the solar system, so that there are a lot of things that bring changes. And we really don't know. When you really think about it, the real good temperature data and carbon dioxide data and methane and water vapor, we don't know very much about it. We've only been measuring those for a little over 100 years, and very accurately with satellites only over 30, 40 years. So it just takes a lot of time, and it's very difficult to decide whether it's man-made, whether man has anything to do with it. I think part of the issue, the pollution, I think that's very important. And our country and everyone has done a lot to prevent pollution, and that could have some effect, but just taking care of our environment is important. And the environment does change, and living here in South Florida, we can see that very clearly. If you go into your backyard and try and dig a hole, what's the first thing you hit once you get under the grass? You hit coral rock. And coral rock means that we were under the ocean at some point in the history here of Florida. Not sure, I'm not a geologist, so I'm not sure exactly when, but it was quite a while ago.
Some people argue that the heat isn't going to set the world on fire before they die. And honestly, it won't. But between tectonic movements and sea levels rising, perhaps your great-grandkids will not get to see Florida because it's sank underwater. And that's an entire state of people and cultures that the Earth will be deprived of.
But who will inform us of changes like this? How will we know how to fix these problems? Well, people like Carrie Sheridan, a scientific journalist.
My name is Carrie Sheridan. I'm a health and science correspondent with the international newswire AFP. That stands for Agence France Presse. It's the French news agency, and we're a global news agency, and we have reporters all over the world.
Do you think the media plays an important role in informing people about climate change?
I think it does, because I think most people get their information from the media. And unfortunately, I think that a lot of the American media doesn't report on the climate in a way that they should, or as often as they should, because there are many, many different angles that you can take with climate stories. They exist everywhere you look, whether it's changing weather, extreme storms, floods, We have lots of daily floods in Miami when there's a high tide now. That's climate change. It's happening right here. So I'm not sure if on the major news channels you always get the real news that's coming out about it, because maybe it's not that interesting or people are bored by it. But to me, it's a really important thing to be able to communicate and communicate well, to be able to engage people in the things that are actually happening around them. That's what the news is all about. So I think we have a big responsibility in the media to get the facts out, to be accurate, to be fast, and to be engaging as much as we can.
We also spoke to Dr. Brian Mapes, a professor of atmospheric science.
Hello, I'm Brian Mapes. I'm a professor here at the University of Miami Rosenstiel School of Marine and Atmospheric Sciences. Kind of inevitable at this point that some amount of climate change is going to happen. So as much as trying to prevent it, it's too late to try and prevent it to some extent, and we need to be planning for it and maybe thinking about ways to minimize it. But it's certainly happening already and going to happen over our lifetimes no matter what we do with this.
Most people care, and you can tell people are trying to make a difference. Everyone realizes climate change is happening, but the source is constantly debated. Will people ever stop arguing and try to prepare themselves? Hopefully future generations will realize the gravity of the issue and work together to save our Earth.